Congressman Paul, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thank you, Judge. Good to be with you.
Thank you. I suppose it's a sign of success when your enemies start firing back. We learned just a few minutes ago that the Federal Reserve has hired a lobbyist, a former employee of the Clinton administration, to try to dissuade members of Congress from signing on to your bill, now known throughout the country as H.R. 1207, which would mandate an audit of the Fed. So how many people have signed on to the bill? How close are you to getting a majority in the Congress? And what is the Fed worried about?
Well, they're worried about being exposed, and that is, of course, a big threat to them, but it would be a blessing to the American people. We have 209 co-sponsors, which means we need 9 more to have 50% of the Congress, which would be an absolute majority. And so far, the lobbyist hasn't gotten anybody to take their name off the bill, so that's doing pretty good. But no, I think they'll do whatever. They'll pull out all their stops to stop the piece of legislation from passing, one way or the other. But you know, I've decided that it's still an uphill struggle. But what we're doing is very, very important. But I've decided we win either way. If we don't get it passed like we want, maybe that'll be bigger news than anything. How did that happen, and why didn't they allow us to? And what really do they have? So I think we got them where we need them, because no matter what, the American people are going to hear about this, and they're going to be wondering, what is it that the Federal Reserve is up to, and why do they have this power to create money out of thin air and pass it out with no oversight of the U.S. Congress? That, to me, should be big news.
Fox Business Network, who's basically a free market person, he's not a big government or left-wing loon, has argued with me on the air as recently as 20 minutes ago over the merits of your bill, and of course you know my view is identical to yours. Stewart's argument is that the Fed would go out of business if people knew about the holes in its accounting. I argued that that's not such a bad thing, but what do you think would actually happen politically in this country if we learned of the nature and extent of the insidious and secret things that this central bank has been doing?
Well, it may be chaotic because people may lose confidence in the Federal Reserve, and they don't deserve the confidence they have, and it might be cause of some serious problems. But it would also mean that if the Federal Reserve is deeply flawed, not only on how they operate to the benefit of some special groups, but it's also deeply flawed in being able to manage the whole entire economy, and now the world economy essentially, means that it would lead to a serious discussion about the nature of money. And this goes on periodically over the centuries about how governments get control of money, how they become the official counterfeiter, how they destroy the value of gold coins, how they clip coins or dilute the metals or print paper, and now they just use computers. It would bring that on. That's coming on anyway. Even if the Fed doesn't get examined and we don't get rid of the Fed, the chaos will come, and we will be forcing into that discussion. Now, if we did things more calmly, and this should be the argument to those who said don't expose it, it'll be chaotic, is that there's a way to avoid all that. Just legalize competition. Allow us to use gold and silver as legal tender. You try that now. If you start minting gold coins and using gold coins in exchange, you're going to get arrested. They don't like anybody tampering with this monopoly power that central banks hold.
I haven't looked at the names of your co-sponsors. I honestly haven't. But I'm willing to guess that in both houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, no one from the leadership of either party is on those lists. If I am right in that guess, why is that so?
Well, I don't think there's any Democratic leadership positions, maybe some subcommittee chairmen, and we have 50 Democrats. But in the Republican side, you got to give them credit. They're coming around. Boehner signed on yesterday, and Spencer Baucus has signed on, and he's been willing to help me get this thing through. And I do talk with Barney Frank, and he's for transparency. He's not for the type of money I want. But there's a lot of sentiment, mainly because they're getting pressure from at home. It's just so logical that Congress should have knowledge about what the Fed is doing. So I guess half of what you said is true, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to work on the assumption that political pressure from home will cause some of the leadership, even on the Democratic side, to go along what we need. But what they could do, though, is if they know this is overwhelming and nobody can pass it, they might even say, oh, let's vote on it on suspension. And everybody gets to vote, and I voted for Ron Paul's audit bill, and then stop it after that. Stop it maybe in the Senate. See, it's not moving in the Senate, and they might stop it in the Senate, or if the Senate passed something, put it in the conference, and then water it down. There will be a lot of scare tactics, and that's what the lobbyists will do. They'll scare people, just like they did after the crash last fall. They just scared people. If you don't vote for this bailout, I mean, the whole economy will be destroyed forever. And they scared people into voting for it. So that's what we have to face yet.
We all know how the government uses fear to get done what it wants, whether it's the Patriot Act destroying the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments, or whether it's the Obama administration destroying freedom of contract. They'll always use fear. And, of course, fear was, as you say, the motivation for the TARP legislation last September. On 60 Minutes on Sunday night, which was a repeat, so we heard the conversation before, two interesting points came to mind. And as I was listening to it, I was thinking of what I would ask you about on Sunday. One was an actual acknowledgement from Chairman Bernanke that when they want to give member banks money, they don't wire funds or send a check or deliver a truck full of cash. They merely add some zeros to an account in a computer. And what we have for generations called fiat money, literally the Latin, let it be, just because we say it should be. We finally have an admission from the chairman that that's how they do it. I want you to comment on that. I also want you to comment on this. He boasted during this interview about the validity of the stress tests that the Fed administered to the top 19 bank holding companies in America. Question: could the Fed itself, could the Federal Reserve Bank itself have passed any one of those stress tests?
No, and that's why they don't want the audit. They can't pass it, so they don't want that exposure. So that's one of the main reasons why they're going to fight it. But like you say about adding on zeros, it's gotten easier and easier to create money, and that's why the bubble got bigger than ever, and the world trusted the dollar. But economic law is more powerful than all the central bankers and all the politicians in the world. Economic law eventually rules. And that, of course, is the reason why empires end for economic reasons more than military reasons. The Soviet system ended for economic reasons. Our system will end the same way. The big question is what can we salvage? Can we salvage the republic in the narrower sense? You know, the Republic of the United States, you know, a much more local thing rather than a world empire. And that would be very, very good. So some good things could come from this, but if we allow the central bank to just add zeros when their friends need to get a big bonus or a big bailout or a big retirement benefit and walk away, and then the people suffer the consequences of having the higher prices, the inflationary pressures and the loss of jobs, that won't go. And that's what I think this excitement is all about.
Interesting criminal case, but it's actually a form of theft, which, of course, the Fifth Amendment expressly prohibits the federal government or any of its instruments from doing. Switching gears to another subject that I know you're passionate about, because I read your statement on the floor of the House, I think, last week, health care. You're just talking about salvaging freedom. Will we be able to salvage any freedom of choice from the health care proposals that the President is trying to get through Congress, he says and hopes, before the August recess? Or is it inevitable that health care in this country, and you know more about this than most because you're also a physician, that health care in this country will look like Medicare, or worse, like the British system?
Well, hopefully it's not inevitable, or we all should all go home or pack our bags, but it doesn't look good. The Republicans weren't good on medical care. they expanded, with prescription drugs and corporate medicine and drug companies all had advantages, and they contributed significantly if they weren't the creators of managed care. But there was always a good position of the Republicans, and that was the medical savings accounts, allowing individuals to opt out if they wanted to. Now, the odds have gone against us on that. With the new administration, I would say it's going to be tough to maintain that. And that's an important principle. As bad as things are in Washington, if you allow people to opt out, take, for instance, what if the federal government clamped down, which some of them would like to, and make sure there would be no private schools and no homeschooling? That to me would be devastating. That is the crack in the door for us to restore liberty to the country, to allow people to get out of the educational system, and we need to do the same thing in the monetary system as well. And we certainly ought to protect the right of the individual to make a choice and get out of the medical system, but unfortunately it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But once again, the limitation may well be the economics of it all, because where are they going to get these trillions of dollars when they won't cut anything? And they're expanding all these overseas expenditures. It's just